Well, hello and welcome to Geospatial-Next. I'm particularly excited by what I'm going to announce at the start of this video. You've heard me talking a lot about Geospatial-Next on my own. I'm now going to be joined by 3 others, and we're going to actually start doing a series of webinars around Geospatial-Next. So I wanted to call this video, the first one in the series, introducing the Geospatial-Next Innovators webinar. So I've got Myles Sutherland, Jim Young and Chris Andrews. They're all innovators in their own right. All 4 of us have something in common. We've all worked for Esri. We've all been in the GIS space for most of our careers. We've all taken different perspectives and different angles at approaching it, both when we've worked together within the GIS industry and now that the 3 others have actually moved into their own worlds to get focused in other specific places. So super excited about this. This is me rubbing shoulders with giants. I have to tell you, I have to pinch myself to think I'm in the same room or virtual room with these guys. So this is the introduction. I've asked them each to talk a little bit about their history, where they are today and their interests and why they're part of this webinar. And this is the first of many webinars, not just us talking about different topics, but we'll also bring in other guests, other innovators in the space, and we'll interview them as well. So this is a really exciting part of the Geospatial-Next journey. Thanks for joining us.
Awesome. So just a little background, I guess, to start on myself. You know, I originally from New Zealand, and over the years have spent most of my career working in the geospatial industry, primarily focused inside of product companies is where I've spent most of my time. Interesting enough, you know, my family are geographers, so I guess I was kind of always going to head in the direction of working in GIS, maybe in some capability, but I was really fortunate at university to start playing around with some GPS devices, got me interested in how to map and model things, and those devices were from a company called Trimble Navigation that had acquired a business in my hometown in Christchurch in New Zealand. So I kind of naturally, well, I guess luckily got the opportunity to start working as a software and hardware device tester inside of that business. And so that's where I started my career. Looking back at that, super thankful, like really exciting to get to go work with engineers and computer scientists who are trying to make something about taking sensor data and figuring out how to turn it into some form of model of the world. That to me was really fascinating and something I always gravitated to. So yeah, in my short career at Trimble, I can't remember how many years I did, but was lucky enough to end up working as a product manager at some point, and then ended up in the United States living in Colorado, and had a fun job working technical services, looking at other parts of the business and what was going on in different P&Ls or with the customers. So that was my start into it. From that, I ended up working at Esri. So I spent 9 or so years working at Esri, based in California, and yeah, we're really fortunate at the time that smartphones and things were becoming kind of interesting, and got to work on a team with a couple of folk that were building, you know, sort of sometimes connected GIS capabilities on a smart device. So a lot of that was location and GPS centric, like how to use positioning to create data on a device in the field, which was, you know, at that time it was a little separate of remote sensing. They were kind of like their kind of separate worlds, and they were sort of coming together a lot more than they had in the past. So yeah, spent a few years working in engineering and product management, and then ended up transitioning into the business team, I think you'd call it, at Esri. Worked in the partner team, and then worked on a little startup program. So starting to look at, you know, creative ways to apply GIS in different technologies. So got to work with some pretty interesting companies building advertising technology to early drone imaging and other types of sensors being put on drones to agricultural tech, you name it. So yeah, that was kind of my history, I guess, a little bit. started a company called 𝐿𝐐𝐸 with a few Kiwi mates of mine that I'd met in the journey. And before I did that, I had a little short period of time at a robotics company based in Silicon Valley that was building an indoor autonomous robot for scanning retail stores, which was super fascinating and started to inform some more of the thinking about why we created 𝐿𝐸. So, you know, it was very laser centric in the way it thought about mapping. And, you know, 𝐿𝐸, we've kind of taken this approach. I think from the day that we started, we were like, man, it would be amazing if we could just take photos and produce GIS or CAD, or I guess what we call now the kind of digital twin data. We could just do it from photos. That would be so much easier for machine learning one day. And potentially it'd be just a lot easier for people to use a camera than to have to figure out how to use a laser scanner and all the things that come along with that. So yeah, that's kind of been the journey. 𝐿𝐸 has evolved a lot since we started it. You know, we originally were building cameras for planes. We were flying Cessnas around, imaging transmission lines and doing full 3D reconstruction of thousands of miles of transmission line. You know, vegetation encroachment, trying to look at like what trees were falling over on the transmission lines or what ones might grow into the transmission lines. We started out with that, but we've taken it all the way from cameras on planes to cameras on vehicles, street level collections. More recently, we've gotten into the indoor space. We haven't really talked too much about that, but we deploy cameras, people walk them around buildings, and we 3D model inside of large critical infrastructure. And you know, that can vary from agricultural facilities with piles of phosphate that you're trying to model in buildings to facilities management, enterprise asset management use cases, and even more recently getting back into the robotics space. So starting to make maps and data that enable robotic type machines and devices to navigate through a space. So yeah, I'm pumped for this, super excited. Like Jim mentioned, there's pretty interesting group that we've got together here, each with our own kind of backgrounds, and we've got our kind of areas of focus, and in some ways they all intersect. Like, you know, I'm looking forward to working with more of what Jim's doing, Matt working with you and what you guys are doing, and then also Chris's world, you know, touches where we're working. You know, machine learning is a massive undertaking today to do it effectively, and there's a lot of work to be done to go still from what we initially envisioned, which was like, imagine a camera just going down the road and no longer viewing a photo. We're just literally getting the full 3D model at ever evolving or growing level of detail. So that, yeah, is going to require a lot more on the machine learning side for us to get to that point.
Okay, so hello, Matt and Jim and Myles. Nice to see you guys today. I am Chris Andrews. I currently am the COO and head of product for a startup company in the AI space called Rendered AI. I have spent about the last 25 years in an interesting arc where I actually started out on my self-taught GIS and programming skills in startup companies back in the late 90s, building on top of Esri products actually initially. And then I ended up going into enterprise consulting, where I got to touch lots of different domains, from crime mapping to utilities to some civilian government work, all kinds of stuff. And then at some point I got kind of tired of being on the end of the whip when it came to implementing software from some of the big vendors such as Oracle and Esri, Autodesk and others. And so I actually kind of intentionally retooled my career to attempt to appeal to one of those companies as somebody who could have a voice in product. And ironically, I ended up getting brought into Autodesk through an article that I wrote. And at first, actually, as a business development person, which was, so I jumped right from technical enterprise development to business development. that was a blast. Business development was fun because essentially the job of a business developer is to ask everybody, how can I help you? And then if you can help them, they're ecstatic. So that was some of the most fun that I ever had. And then I literally got hijacked to be a product manager. I have since been in product management for the last 14 years or so. First, I was a junior product manager on the digital cities effort at Autodesk, and then I took that over when my boss got bumped onto another product, and that project became InfoWorks, that's out there alive and well today. I spent a little bit of time running a life sciences startup inside Autodesk. I then went over into media and entertainment, where I launched another product that's still out there, Autodesk Character Generator. I then made a transition briefly through IBM, but then over to Esri, where I spent most of the last 7 years. I started out as the 3D product manager at a time when Google was getting out of supposedly the enterprise market. So I helped start ArcGIS Earth, and then I helped start the Autodesk partnership. I got to be involved with i3S and many other great aspects of Esri, both products and then helping to grow the product management team. I joined Rendered because I just was looking for a next career step, and also to branch out into a little bit different side of technology. And I'm excited to still be part of the Earth observations geospatial world. We joined the Esri startup program, although we haven't really announced that yet. And I will be a familiar face at Esri conferences coming up. Rendered builds a platform as a service that helps data scientists who can't acquire, because of expense or physical impracticality, training data for computer vision cases such as Earth observations, so things like simulated satellite imagery. We've got an OEM provider who actually built an X-ray simulator that they run for generating synthetic X-ray images for security use cases on our platform. We are attempting to solve the issue that data is scarce and expensive, and is actually an inhibitor for many smaller companies' ability to build and validate products in a highly competitive, fast-moving technology area where folks are not just building a part or a standalone software product anymore, but now they're often building integrated, complicated hardware and software that has to learn continuously and requires training data to build AI to satisfy a variety of industry use cases that simply weren't able to be satisfied a few years ago. We offer subscription, and we're a small company. We are venture funded. We are part of the Amazon, NVIDIA, and Esri partner programs, and we certainly will be branching out into a variety of both geospatial and non-geospatial use cases in the future. My own interests stem from, I actually got into mapping by way of role-playing games and drawing maps, and so mapping, I was never I was always interested in the real world, and I studied geology and other physical earth sciences, but I was never a cartographer per se, or geographer per se. I actually ended up getting into software development because I liked to use code to automate and solve problems. So automate repetitive work and solve problems. I am still doing that in the job I'm in now. I love these early stage markets where there are a lot of hairy, obvious problems to solve, and it just takes somebody who can actually look at it and look at what it should be in 5 to 10 years, and then work back from that and figure out how to actually solve the problem. I'm excited to be part of this webinar series, not only to participate with you guys in regular conversations, but also because I've certainly learned that no one is an island, and I can have all of the brilliant thoughts on my own that I want, but they're meaningless unless they're validated and field tested against the real opinions and experiences of other folks in the industry. And I certainly hope that includes folks that we actually invite on and interview. I think that we'll get tired of hearing each other after a while, and so there's a long list of of folks who are doing exciting things out there in the industry and who need folks like us to talk about what they're doing. And so I certainly hope that we can bring our voices and also the interest of some of the groups that follow us to bear on some new problems around both technology, geospatial, and then real world problems that we want to help solve.
Thanks, Chris.
So yeah, thanks for having Chris and Myles and I on. It's good to see everybody's face again, and looking forward to seeing everybody in person here, hopefully in Palm Springs or San Diego or somewhere. So yeah, I am currently, I've relocated very recently back to Austin, Texas to get closer to family, and I'm operating a small consulting business that I founded focused on enterprise analytics called Atomic Maps. But really, I would say I'm a product guy in terms of my background and my interests. My background is in remote sensing and software development and location services. I founded a couple of startups, neither of which were terribly memorable, but learned a lot along the way, and have worked on a lot of product teams over the years. But more recently, I just finished up a 9 years at 𝐃𝐈, where I was actually focused on a BD role, BD and sales role, focused on partnerships in the commercial and tech markets, and essentially focused on emerging geospatial markets, where this idea of geospatial workflows, I think, companies like Uber come to top of mind, where, essentially they're solving a geospatial problem, but they're not necessarily using traditional GIS tools to solve that. And so this developer and product centric story for all kinds of emerging markets, where companies like 𝐃𝐨 offering platform and developer facing services could put some energy into an offering or set of offering for helping these companies go to market. And the first one that I focused on at 𝐃𝐨 was first big market that I focused on at 𝐃𝐨 was mobile advertising, where the value of location data to influence the CPM prices substantial, like 6x the value of CPM, by having that high fidelity location data or GPS derived location data. You could essentially make a much more refined bid in these mobile advertising systems. And I worked with several of the large ones and learned really about both scale and automation, where, so a lot of these companies that are consuming on the demand side, consuming these ad feeds are seeing 2 or 3 billion daily location, XY coordinate pairs that are time stamped, and how do they, in a matter of milliseconds, make a bid against the right to serve an ad, and how do you build up and enrich audience segments offline using location data to make those targeted bids. That whole ecosystem around location was very different than traditional GIS, but extremely interesting and very focused on data and scale. And that's sort of what I began to gravitate towards over these last 10 years. Then I spent time in the automotive markets, working with companies like Nexar and Mobileye that have these front-facing cameras using computer vision to both, they started out focused on ADAS and collision avoidance, and I'm driving along, does the steering wheel vibrate when I drift over in the lane based on computer vision, hard braking assist if you need to brake when there's a car in front of you. But that same technology and platform can be used to train models and push those models out to these devices so that they're able to see and recognize things like manholes or stop signs or street furniture, and even extract things like the reflectivity or the percentage vegetation coverage of a stop sign and dispatch against that. So you could take these kind of passive data collection sensors that are on the road collecting data and serve that data through 𝐃𝐈 into traditional markets like state and local government. And that kind of bridge was very interesting to me, and the capabilities of these network sensors, whether it's front-facing cameras or fixed cameras, IoT systems, and things like that. I spent a lot of time focused on both the kind of technology underneath those, and then the value of the derivative data back to ecosystems, back to the Esri ecosystem in that case. And then thirdly, and maybe finally, was in terms of the three big chapters that I had at Esri. The third one was around advanced analytics and data science. And there, you see this observation of is the data science sort of market and ecosystem learning geospatial faster than the GIS and geospatial market is learning data science. And I think they're on a collision course. And there's a whole range of tools that are being used there. A lot of open source, a lot of different analytics engines, things like Apache Spark that I was drawn to, and this ability to take data and extract insights out of it, sort of at a very broad brush strokes. And as part of that, I spent some time working with Amazon, with AWS, helping Esri launch a partnership there around a product called Amazon Location, which is an AWS native service that is a bunch of location services that are essentially backstopped by Esri's developer model. But the real observation there, and really what I'm drawn to now at Atomic, is this observation in all of those markets, in ad tech, mobile marketing, in automotive, in advanced analytics and data science, and in these kind of commercial markets that I spent so much time focused on. Most of the geospatial data in those, at least in those commercial markets and those use cases, is not being stored in a GIS. It's being stored in object storage or in a data lake. And that can be everything from the telemetry coming off of vehicles, or the SDK impression data coming off of these mobile ad SDKs, where you're seeing lat-long, timestamp, device ID kinds of streams. It's also IoT data, both fixed and moving. It's also LiDAR data, oblique imagery coming off of the front-facing cameras of cars, coming off of the stuff that Myles does, all this aerial and terrestrial collection. And it's even, low orbit satellite imagery that has high refresh. All of that data is being landed essentially in S3 or equivalent. And the compute is being applied onto that data at rest. So it's not being ETL'd out into some other analytics engines. It's actually the compute is being brought onto the data to surface insights up into other systems that are downstream, like GIS or BI or things like SAP and asset management systems. And so the consulting practice is really focused on that pattern of finding these large commercial data sets. I'm focused on a few markets: utilities, logistics, the tech markets, and commercial real estate, where they have lots of these data types, the ones I just mentioned, helping them extract value out of that data at rest in their data lake by bringing compute onto it and surfacing that data into technologies like Esri's. And BI systems, and the real goal there is to take the best that the cloud has to offer in terms of AWS, Azure, GCP. There's lots of insights you can apply onto that data at rest using standard tools inside of each of those three ecosystems, applying those analytics engines on that data, and then taking the best of what Esri has and the best of what these cloud offers have, and essentially combining those in the form of a consulting practice. And that's where I've been focused for the last couple of years, partly at Esri and then now at Atomic. And there, the kind of broader story there is I think it dovetails into what Chris just described, and also into what Myles will hopefully describe, which is, how do you go from sensor or from collection? And sensor or collection, again, can mean a mobile observation based on opening an app and taking a location sample. It can mean driving around with a camera, 360 camera on your car. It can mean flying with a LiDAR unit attached. But how do you go from that collection to the decision, and really compress that and automate that kind of life cycle? Because that data currently passes through a bunch of different systems, and then it might end up going into some dispatch system or an asset management system. But how can you kind of compress all of that so that you can move both quickly and accurately to an insight into a decision, out of the raw pixels or out of the raw location feed, and move those insights down as close to the data as you can. And I think the answer there is you have to be able to take the compute and apply it onto the data, rather than the inverse. And so, I mean, the reason, like, kind of that's sort of where my interest lies, and the reason why I'm involved in this is because I think we represent four unique perspectives and the ability to capture n number of infinite unique perspectives through our personal networks. But we represent four pretty unique perspectives. Chris has very much has the built environment in a very unique perspective on that, a very unique perspective on training data and on the whole AI ecosystem. Myles has a great perspective on 3D imagery and geometry and the intersection of those things. I come from kind of this big data, advanced analytics background, and you have this very holistic view, and especially around the utility network and all of the kind of utilities. And I think the combined view of those four perspectives is going to unlock something really interesting, especially when we can bring in a bunch of outsiders to sort of bounce ideas off of. And the whole goal here is to stay really fresh and current with thinking, and to be able to use this as kind of a way of hardening ideas and clarifying ideas. And so I'm really excited.
Great. Many thanks, Jim. That's great. Thanks for joining us on the Geospatial-Next channel. We're focused here on understanding the future of geospatial. That's both how we get to mainstream adoption of the technology and data, and how we start using blockchain and crypto to move things forward. Please feel free to subscribe to the channel, and we'll look forward to seeing you next time.